The Public Affairs Research Institute says political influence has hampered the public service. Earlier this year, Deputy Public Minister Sindisiwe Chikunga claimed government is on track to ensure that by 2030, the sector is professionalized and positioned for skilled young graduates. But the Institute believes not enough has been done. We're now joined by Dr. Mbongiseni Buthelezi, who's the Executive Director of the Public Affairs Research Institute. Good evening, and thank you so much for your time. Of course, one of the issues that you've previously raised when it comes to the public service is just the ability of increasing the trust levels between ordinary members of the public and, of course, part of those in the public servants who have a responsibility and a duty towards their customers.
Indeed. Thank you, Cathy. I think what we all want is, if you go to any office of the public service, if you go to any government office, you go to Home Affairs, if you go and renew your driver's license, to be treated with dignity, for starters, but also to know that you are going to receive professional service. And if that does not happen, that there is a recourse mechanism that you can turn somewhere and something will be done about it if you report poor service that you receive. As things stand currently, most of us cannot really trust that the recourse mechanisms that exist are going to yield the kinds of results that you are looking for when you've been treated badly with contempt by a public servant. So that's one issue that needs to be dealt with.
Oh.
But the other issue that...
Sure, go ahead, go ahead.
I mean, the other issue is this question of... there's a big issue around, if we think about what has been termed state capture in South Africa, where political interference in the public service goes so far that public servants are not always appointed on merit, not always appointed to do the job that they need to do for the public, but actually to do the bidding of their political masters. And that's one of the bigger issues that we also have to deal with in the public service in this country.
The public service has drawn an incredible bad rep, especially for some of the issues that you have raised, because on one level you have executives who are unable to explain some of their decisions, especially when it comes to areas over which they have authority. On the other end, there's just the bad service that is given sometimes to South Africans at the receiving end of what is supposed to be the work of the public service. Why is this the case? One certainly doesn't get a sense that there is consistency in terms of how public officials understand their role.
I think there are a number of issues. Let's first deal with the question of bad service that people get. I think one of the issues is that people are appointed into positions where they are public-facing without necessarily having the right skills, without being given the right skills. And inside the public service itself, the systems for managing performance are not robust enough. So that's one of the big interventions that is needed to improve performance management systems and to improve recourse systems that are available to the public. And thirdly, to improve the way in which people are promoted in the public service. So those are some of the things that need to be improved in the way that the public service works. But when it comes to, you mentioned the issue of managers, sometimes not even knowing some of the basic things that they need to know. That has to do, I think, largely with the way in which people are recruited into the public service, promoted and are fired. The systems, again, that we have are not robust enough. So people get hired into the public service, where we've seen in some cases, if we think about local government, which in fact in our definition in South Africa is not also part of the public service. The public service is national and provincial services. At local government level, for example, one of the things that we see often is that the HR functions in a lot of municipalities are being used to channel people into the public service that don't qualify, and to then use those people to be able to coordinate around the rules when it comes to things like corruption. And so one of the things that need to be strengthened are the ways in which people are recruited, in which people are promoted, in which people are dismissed from the public service. And here there's a big role to play for the Public Service Commission. And at local government level, we need Public Service Commission type processes to be established that simply don't exist at the moment.
There's, for decades now, been a lot of talk about professionalizing the public service. Do you think that that situation has gotten better, or has it simply worsened over time?
It's always been very uneven. And I think we also need to remember here that we need to trace this historically a little bit. In 1997, the Batu Pili principles were introduced into the public service. They were precisely about improving the experience of the public service by people who approach the state. They are about integrity. They are about good service being provided to people. Over the years, we saw a great deal of focus on those principles in the late 90s, early 2000s, but they've also gradually, I think, slipped out of view, and there isn't as much focus on them. Every now and again, you hear about interventions being made, and then you see minor improvement for a time, particularly in departments like Home Affairs. And then there's turnover at the top, and things begin to slip again. So it's very uneven. But the other part of the history that we need to be mindful of that influences the public service is that the public service we have in South Africa is an amalgamation of public services that existed in the former homelands, in the former so-called white South Africa. And in the amalgamation of those public services, people were drawn from bureaucracies that had very different cultures. Some of those cultures have continued. I mean, where I come from, for example, I grew up in KwaZulu. In KwaZulu, public servants were very, very contemptuous of the public. And I think that was the case in many of the Bantustans. Some of those people got drawn into the public service that we have in post-apartheid South Africa. And some of those elements of those cultures have continued to perpetuate themselves. And because there isn't focused training that all public servants have to go through, even new people that get drawn into the public service get inculcated into these old residual cultures. And that's part of the reason why you end up with some of the old problems that one saw in the Bantustans perpetuating themselves. And here again, there's a big need for a uniform training across the public service, with the National School of Government and provincial schools that exist in some of the provinces, making uniform training so that all the public servants get put through the same training, and cohorts of public servants move through this public service in their careers, where they support each other, and there's a spirit that they carry through the public service, the spirit of service to the public. And that's where some of the big interventions still need to be made.
Dr. Mbongiseni Buthelezi, let me thank you for your time. He is the Executive Director at the Public Affairs Research Institute.